Hi, I'm Juna, and I'm a previous CapCut user who has recently switched to DaVinci Resolve and also who haven't learned Fusion in their 4th month of using DaVinci Resolve now. So in today's video, I'm gonna be attempting to learn Fusion in 3 days, and by day 3, I will also attempt to make something like this. Let's see if I can make it. Okay, some background context here. I've used Fusion before, but I've only used it when I follow along a tutorial, and when I do use it on my own, I would only use this like very simple notes on display here. I would say that my current knowledge of the Fusion page is very surface level. So in these 3 days, I want to learn and explore some more advanced notes. Alright, before I start learning, I should first understand what kind of things Fusion is capable of making. The first thing that caught my attention was the paint node where you can remove the unwanted objects. I think this will be a useful thing to learn, so let's try and make that. Alright, first let's put a paint node here, and then you click on this stroke and then the clone. And after that, you just have to click on Option or Alt on your keyboard. Then you click on a spot that you want to replicate. And as you can see, I click on the spot without the animal, and then I just paint over the animal and the animal is removed. And after I paint out the animal, I wanted to practice some more. So I also tried to remove a few things in the background. I feel like this one was quite easy to do because the surface of the snow is quite big, and because it is snow, it is pure white, so there was no other colors to take into consideration, and that made the whole process a lot more simple. Next is the 3D text. This one was also quite simple to make, but I learned that for some nodes, you cannot just connect it to the media out. It won't work. You have to have some linking nodes for it to work. In this case, that was the merge 3D and the render 3D for this 3D text to work. And after I finished playing around with the 3D text, I move on to learn another thing, which is the activity rings that we saw on the website. The tutorial that I watched for this one was a little bit more complicated than what I initially planned to make. So for this one, you have to create a new control for the percentage, and then you have to link it to the length of the circle, and then you also have to write some commands. It is a bit complicated, but I think it was also quite interesting to learn. Another interesting thing about this tutorial is the mention of anim curves. Instead of readjusting your keyframe, you just have to change the settings, and then the same animation will apply. I think this is one of the functions that can save up a lot of time, so I'll definitely look more into it. I also tried to make these activity rings with the 3 circles but without the percentage. Oh, my bad. I think earlier the circle that we made, I meant to say progress ring. So yeah, sorry about that. At first, I tried to make all 3 circles in one Fusion composition, but it was a bit too complex for me at that point. Like, I didn't understand when we were supposed to link the nodes and when we were supposed to merge the nodes. I don't understand the difference. So I decided to just make each circle in different Fusion composition and then stack it up. I also drew a questionable heart shape, and then I put some effect on it to make it seem like the heart is beating. So when people see this infographic, they can tell that, oh, this is related to your health or your body, something like that. And that's a wrap for day 1. For day 2, I mainly focus on this particle emitter node. At first, I simply learned it because I saw this from the website and I thought it was a fancy effect and I wanted to learn it, but it turns out that this node can make a whole lot more things. I stumbled upon this tutorial and it reminded me a lot of the pixie dust in Tinkerbell. I love Tinkerbell, so I was like, I need to learn how to make this. And then I just immediately started working on it. I was a bit dumbfounded at first because all of the nodes that are mentioned in this tutorial are very unfamiliar to me, like P-spline, P-emitter, P-render, P-flock. I didn't understand what those were, but because this tutorial only used a few main nodes and they copy and pasted over and over to polish it and make it more realistic, like using a variety of the particle shapes, readjusting the velocity so that the flow is more natural, and also readjusting the color. So gradually, I've kind of got a grasp on what's happening, and after I finished making it alongside with the tutorial, I was about to go around these nodes and play with the settings, but it was too messy, so I had to organize it first. After the notes became more readable and has some structure to it, I started to go around and play with the settings of each note just to see how it affects the result, and I think this was a pretty effective way for me to learn. At this point, I was getting a bit comfortable with using Fusion, and I was also getting a little bit more confident. I remember seeing this thing from the website where you can add stuff like fog and rain and snow, and like I said, I was getting a bit confident, so I thought thought I could make this on my own. I tried making this one without watching a tutorial. I play around on my own and I learned a lot from this practice. And just as I was about to finish making this, my dad walked past me, so I quickly showed it to him and I asked him, "Can you tell that this snow is edited?" And without hesitation, he said,
"Yeah."
And because I have been sitting for a couple of hours now, I decided to stand up and also go grab some snack with my dad. And the thing is, I planned to finish this after I had my snack, but when my snack break was over and I came back to work, I opened my laptop and I just habitually opened YouTube. The first thing that I saw was this firework tutorial and I thought, wow, that looks really cool. So yes, I completely forgot about the snow and I never got to work on it again. That's that. Let's just move on to the fireworks. This was so complicated. I was even more dumbfounded than the fairy dust tutorial. Like right from the start, the tutorial changed the perspective, but I struggled to get it in the same perspective as the tutorial because they didn't show how to do it. I couldn't figure it out until later on, but I'll tell you now. You have to press shift so you can move it like this, or you can press command and you can move it around like this. But because at this point I couldn't figure out how to do it yet, I ended up in a front view mode instead of a perspective mode. I personally don't think that it made that big of a difference. The entire time that I was making this, I remember feeling very amazed by how technology works. Like, who even came up with these nodes and functions that could be mixed and matched with one another to create countless things? That is genius. Okay, let's say I thought editing was this big of a circle, but this genuinely expanded what I thought editing was by 100 times. Even though the tutorial was only around 20 minutes, but I think this took me around 1 hour and a half to finish making, and eventually I did end up with these really cool fireworks. And yes, I was very proud even though I just followed along a tutorial. Alright guys, it's time to attempt to make this green screen thing. The keyword here is attempt. I will be doing this on my own with completely no tutorials just to see how much I've learned for the past 2 days. And I also don't think that there is a tutorial for this one either. I'll be honest, I'm not confident at all. I don't think I can do this, but here goes nothing. First, I noticed that there were some studio lights and also a camera crew. So I used a paint node to paint over them and then made the whole background green. And then I used a 3D keyer to remove the whole green screen, but there was still some greens here and there, so I decided to just crop out a small rectangle where the characters were. But then I realized that it would have been faster to just crop first and then work with the green screen, because the scene only has a small portion of elements that needs to be used, so I guess it's okay to crop first. But let's say this is a close-up shot. I think it would be more ideal to use the previous method where we used the paint node. I'm not a professional, so please take what I said with a grain of salt. I'm just sharing my logic, and that might not necessarily be the case. After I finished removing the green screen, I went to watch the edited background and see that there are two main elements: the sparkly galaxy trail and the shooting stars. For the galaxy trail, I thought it was a bit similar to the fairy dust, so I started with a B-spline and mapped out the trail. The thing that I struggled the most while making this one is the flow of the particles. I couldn't get it to flow naturally the way that I want. I spent a good amount of time trying to get the flow right, but it just doesn't. So I play around with the angle and the velocity, and somehow I get this somewhat decent flow. And then I play with the particles, I changed colors and add some glow effects, and it turned out to be something like this. I was quite happy with the results, so I move on to the shooting stars. For the shooting stars, I use similar step as to when we were working on the fireworks. I think the end of the star looks very fake, so I tried to adjust it, but there was not much difference. But towards the end of the process, I did add some glows and the star was less obvious, so that kind of affects what I was worried about. I also changed the angle of the camera so the angle looks a bit more natural, and once the two elements are somewhat decent and acceptable, I started working on details like small background stars and some Aurora. Oh my god, I can't say Aurora. The background stars were pretty simple to make, and then I move on to the Aurora. For this one, I just play around and follow my instincts. It turned out okay at first, but after placing it at different places and adjusting its size, it felt very out of place, so I ended up just deleting it. For the first few seconds, the trail is not visible. It was fading in instead of a constant trail, so I decided to render out a selected portion to view the first results. I wasn't satisfied with the first result, so I made some adjustment to it. The first thing that I noticed is the trail is too big and it flows way too fast, so I had to fix that first. And the second one is the shooting stars. It feels a bit off, so I make some adjustment to it as well. And here's the second result. That's a lot better. I think it looks pretty decent. Like, I'm not gonna compare myself to what is professionally edited by professionals, but for 3 days as a beginner, I don't think this is too bad. So yeah, that's my 3 days journey of learning Fusion. I hope you learned something from it. If not, I hope you at least find it entertaining. And that's it for the video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.